Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Clive Behrman, and welcome to the Salesforce Center of Excellence series from Informatica. Today, we're going to talk about best practices for scalable cloud deployments, and especially with a focus on Salesforce. So as already said, my name is Clive Behrman, and I will be joined today by Ryan Hoffmeister, who is the Senior Manager for Life Sciences Technology at Deloitte. Hello, Ryan. How are you?
Good, Clive. How are you doing today?
I'm doing super. So if you're new to this platform, new to BrightTalk, the webinar will be available for replay after we've closed out this session. And then also, if you click on the attachments button at the top of your screen there, you will get all of these slides and a bunch of other resources for you to try too. So wait until we come to the end, then you'll hear what we have to say, and we'll be good to go. So I'm going to briefly talk about our Center of Excellence series. I'm going to talk about the challenges of a dynamic environment such as Salesforce. We're talking about real-world considerations of the sort of problems and intricacies that people come into when they deploy Salesforce, and especially as it relates to the data and integration difficulties that folks have. And Ryan is going to be kind enough to step through some life science case study. He's going to give an illustration of how Deloitte can add expertise. He's going to talk about some strategy and implementation and activities, some solution considerations, and really what Deloitte brings to the table as it relates to the Center of Excellence. If we have time, we'll do some quick Q&A, and I'd like also to leave you with something to chew on, and we'll look at some next steps. So what is a Center of Excellence? I've just taken the definition here from Wikipedia. That shows a sign of the times. I think probably we take it from the Oxford English Dictionary in prior lives, but no, I've taken it from Wikipedia here. A team, a shared facility, or an entity that provides leadership, best practices, research support, and training for a particular focus area. And of course, our particular focus area today, as I've said, will be Salesforce and Salesforce implementations in the wider context of your enterprise. So, as we said, what are we going to focus on? Salesforce deployments. We're going to look at some best practices. Maybe there's going to be a bit of a support network too. Feel free to email us or Deloitte after you hear our presentation today. Tips to help you build your own Center of Excellence. What it's not going to be, I'm not going to be diving too deeply into any particular one area of Salesforce. So, I'm not going to tell you how to configure your outbound messaging support or things like that. And I'm not really going to do a vendor competitive analysis as to these things are good, these things are bad, you should use these tools. Again, we're going to give you some general advice and look at some tips that Deloitte has kindly given us. So let's start. We know that Salesforce is the center of your customer success platform, right? You have Sales Cloud for your sales folks and contact management and your leads and your opportunities. You have the Service Cloud to help you sort of post-sales for customer service. You have your Marketing Cloud for your lead nurturing, or maybe your email campaigns, or your multi-channel campaigns. You've got your Community Cloud, which helps you build your community and offer your sites. Now, Salesforce has introduced recently Analytics Cloud. So there's a wonderful product called Salesforce Wave to help you do not just reporting, but sort of business intelligence, if you like, for Salesforce. And then, of course, Salesforce isn't just a collection of applications. It's a platform that you can build your own apps onto, and Salesforce has started to build apps. So with the Lightning Connect and the Lightning framework, how do you manage the data in that environment too? And what we see is whether you're using a singular application or multiple Salesforce applications, there's really a challenge and really a life cycle that we see here. As the deployment complexity increases over time, we see more and more users, more and more clouds, more and more data sources, more and more locations, and more plug-in applications that really, when you sort of begin your implementation with Salesforce, it all looks clean and it's all nice, but over time they all kind of compound on one another. You end up with things like duplication, or the records aren't correct, or it takes you too long to find certain things, or maybe the data's invalid, emails are invalid, and as we said, as you add more and more Salesforce complexity, those data errors, if you like, just compound more and more. And the effects of that, you see here. We know that 90% use multiple sandboxes for testing. We know that 54% of Salesforce users use actually 2 or more Salesforce clouds. So whether that's a couple of instances of Sales Cloud, or maybe Sales and Service Cloud together, or maybe Sales Cloud and Marketing Cloud, or Sales and Wave. So over half use multiple clouds. We see that over half use tools and analytics tools that are outside of Salesforce. We see that there's an ever-increasing move to mobility, so folks are looking to increase their mobile investment. When we talked about that data before, we see almost 60% don't really have a single view of their customer, which is ironic because, as we said, sort of Salesforce is the customer platform. And nearly 40% aren't really confident in their data quality that is in that environment. And we also see that there's very different business challenges by Salesforce Cloud. So the sales obviously is focused on increasing deals or revenue size or productivity or improving things like margin. Versus, if I go to the far end, Community Cloud is all about building community following, improving self-knowledge, improving self-service, increasing that knowledge. So really, each cloud also comes with a set of business challenges that they're trying to overcome as well. So we've got multiple clouds that have integration and data challenges. We have multiple clouds that have different business challenges. And as we said, we've got that data challenge. How do we make all those things work together? So what we're proposing is really 2 things that make that solution much better and much more easier to manage the complexity across all of those clouds. Obviously, one is a cloud integration and data management layer. So that's the technology, if you like. And Informatica has a fantastic array of products that will help you solve different data management and different integration challenges. And then we rely on our partners really to provide that best practice, that expertise, that implementation knowledge that goes on top of that technology to help you with those business challenges that we saw before. So as we said, what does Informatica do? We bring great data to any of those Salesforce clouds. So now I've fattened out that very first slide a little bit with just a bit more of the examples of the types of things that you might integrate with each particular cloud. So for example, you might integrate SAP with your inventory data with your Sales Cloud. You might, in fact, not have Service Cloud and maybe have an alternative service solution instead. So maybe you're using ServiceMax or ServiceNow instead of Service Cloud. Similarly, if I've got Sales Cloud, maybe I'm using Marketo or Eloqua or some other marketing application. In some instances, we even have some customers that are using SQL Server as their marketing database. Community is always better when you're using the larger community. So maybe you want to include data from LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook or even Salesforce Chatter. Analytics, we already mentioned before that nearly 60% of folks are using solutions for analytics that are outside of Salesforce. So perhaps you're using Redshift or Teradata or Microsoft Azure or something like that. Even Workday has its own little analytics suite for HR-related analytics. So perhaps you're using something like that. And again, perhaps you want to integrate, in this instance, I've got some financial service systems that perhaps you've written a Force.com application that requires data from vertical specific applications. And I know Ryan's going to talk about some of those things in the life sciences and pharma example. So, and then just briefly, I know I said I wasn't going to go technical, but how quickly does a quick overview on how our architecture works for data integration. We have a thing called a secure agent that essentially will allow all the rules to be loaded. You define the rules in the tools at the top right. They get pushed down to the secure agent, and then that secure agent can speak to all of those other systems, whether they're on-premise or whether they're in the cloud, to shuffle the data back and forwards between the particular data sources based on the rules that you set, the time schedule, and such like. So that's just one of the products in the integration portfolio. So there's a lot of things to consider, right? We've got, when we're talking about data integration, and we're talking about that with across multiple Salesforce clouds, multiple on-premise and cloud systems. We're talking different types of applications. Lots of things come up. Should I use a batch kind of philosophy where I am updating data maybe once a day? If you think about how banking kind of traditionally works, you batch everything up at the end of the day, whereby then you do all your settlements or at the end of the day, and you do millions of rows get updated. Or should you do something more in real time? So as an event occurs, you would make updates to all of the other systems. So maybe you federate that update to say your shipping or your inventory system. Should I deploy hybrid or cloud? That's a great question too. If I'm just dealing with cloud sources, should I just deploy a cloud solution for integration and data management? Or do I utilize maybe some on-premise technology that I already own or I have in my I have at my disposal? And we'll cover some of those questions too. For example, you might say, well, that's really driven by if I have hybrid or if I have on-premise or cloud data sources. I mean, perhaps it makes that decision for me. But as you'll see, that question actually contains quite a lot of nuance. And again, Ryan will cover that too. Another question is, should I master the data, and how should I master that data? Some of my customers have decided that they don't want any duplication within Salesforce whatsoever, so they're going to master the data, and then which means I'm going to have a singular copy that I refer to of a particular account record and all of the accounts and contacts and everything that goes with that. Some of my accounts decided that they would they're fine with having some duplication. So maybe they want duplicate leads, for example, that would relate to, so then they can count the individual activities per marketing campaign or marketing channel. Again, that decision is up to you, but I think it's a valid question, should you master the data? A massive, massive question, again, is how do I ensure data quality? You know, is it okay to have values in those fields, or should I really ensure that once I have a value in a field, that it is actually valid? So, for example, it's a valid email address, it's a working email address. Or should am I just fine with having dummy values in there or no values at all? Similarly, if I've got telephone numbers and street addresses, how do I ensure that that data is all valid too? So that, again, another big question. How do I manage test data? Things like if I've got sandboxes, do I want to replicate millions and millions of rows just so I have enough data to test in my Salesforce sandbox? Again, that's a question that it's probably a bit beyond the scope of today, but we should consider in sort of a center of excellence to have that full life cycle from test into staging, into production, and sort of back to test again. How do I ensure compliance? Ryan's going to have something to say on compliance, especially in the pharma space. Should you use mobile? Again, another great question to ask. I think for me that largely depends on how mobile your users are. In some verticals and in some situations, most folks do all their work at their desks. In other cases, you know, they're out and about roaming the streets. And should I track social? Again, that comes down to you whether you really need social data stored in your Salesforce or maybe stored somewhere else so you can use it in your data warehouse. So again, these are sort of the common questions that come up when you get not just one Salesforce environment, but when you have many. It gets quite complicated then. So with that, I think, you know, I've talked about the technology. I've talked about maybe some of the issues as it relates to multiple data sources. I've talked about having multiple Salesforce systems. So I think now would be a great time to turn it over to Ryan, and who's going to give you some practical examples of how Deloitte has tackled some of these issues. So Ryan, take it away.
Thanks, Clive. Absolutely. Thanks, Clive, and thanks for that great overview. Again, we've prepared a series of slides here and taking us 15 to 20 minutes to go through them to hopefully talk about some real-world examples and to address some of those specific questions that Clive has just talked us through as it relates to Informatica and cloud-based deployments on Salesforce. Just real quickly, again, to introduce myself, I'm a senior manager in Deloitte's Life Sciences Technology practice. Where I focus and where I specialize is right at this intersection of our web and cloud-based technologies and our integration with them, really bringing all the data and bringing to life those rich user experiences in cloud-based deployments for our life sciences clients. I wanted to start with just a high-level kind of functional overview of the case study that we'll be talking through here and some of the examples that we'll be talking through. So over the last year, I've been leading a large global transformation at one of our largest life sciences clients, where we've been standing up a number of systems in support of their sales, marketing, and service organizations. So from a functional level, starting on the upper right, that included both the Viva CRM platform, that's a life sciences vertical for the field Salesforce, as well as Service Cloud on the Salesforce platform for the patient services organization. Both of those were on the Force.com platform and are really those end user facing tools that are both online on the desktop and also on mobile devices that go out with the field sales reps. Moving to the top left, we really engaged heavily with the marketing department here in standing up all the data and all the integration to support ongoing marketing operations. This included integrations with external vendors where we were receiving survey questions and answers from consumers into the environment, as well as building a complete view of opt and consent management. These three functions were really pulled together here in our commercial data hub, which is that middle box on the left, which really pulled together a complete 360-degree view of all the customer interactions. As Clive mentioned up front, this is an area where we really see a lot of clients struggle in pulling this together, and that was the key component of this functional architecture, bringing all these transactions together. That commercial data hub served a couple purposes. Again, some of the key things that Clive mentioned around data standardization, around rules and error handling for data. That was all built leveraging Informatica and some of our proprietary accelerators within that commercial data hub layer. And then to pull this all together, in the bottom left, we leveraged a number of master data management solutions, both for the patients as well as for the doctors and organizations that were out there. Again, if you think through the use case, not only do we have a Salesforce environment, but we're getting data from multiple third-party vendors in, that master data management solution was key to uniquely identifying a customer across the ecosystem and bringing that data together in the commercial data hub. And then finally, on top of that, the reporting and analytics solutions, your standard commercial data warehouse, and third-party reporting tools that pull together the dashboarding and the analytics to really bring to life all of the data that's included in the solution. So overall, those orange boxes just really represent how Informatica was deployed to tie together that complete 360-degree view across this commercial infrastructure. I'll move now to what is a vastly simplified architectural landscape supporting that functional view, and I'll talk a little bit here just in terms of some of the technologies and some of the considerations in place. So thinking back to that slide that Clive had in the beginning around kind of the maturing view of a Salesforce deployment, this client really jumped from zero, probably pretty close to the upper right-hand side of that maturity curve, as we stood up two separate Salesforce.com instances or orgs, one in the U.S. and one in the EU. In the U.S., that org contained two different Salesforce applications. We also had in the mix the marketing cloud, as well as a series of internal web platforms that were all brought together, again, on a third-party hosted platform as a service type solution. Bringing to the mix here, we had a number of internal and third-party vendors to integrate with, which you see in the middle here, all coming into that commercial data hub. When we really looked across this landscape and looked at what would be required to properly integrate this, at really seeing data move around this architecture at the speed of need, Informatica Cloud was the clear choice here from bringing data down from our Force.com based solutions. Informatica Cloud was deployed for both the replication and the synchronization that it had with Force.com. For our web platforms, we chose actually a message-based architecture so that as individual messages or individual transactions were being entered into the web, they could actually move real-time both into Force.com as well as into that commercial data hub. Once all that data was landed in that commercial data hub, it really was tied together with that internal enterprise applications and those commercial vendors and partners, which were really your large-based sales, third-party sales data, all the data really required to support a 360-degree view of the customer that was not generated in the cloud itself. And around that, we built an audit, balance, and control framework, which, as I mentioned earlier, is really the thing that tied together the data quality and ensured the ongoing operations were able to identify errors and quickly act on those errors as they came together. From there, all that data went down to the commercial data warehouse as needed for the purposes of reporting and analytics in a denormalized environment. Again, Informatica Power Center was really the tool of choice to bring all this together for its processing power, for the transformation power, and for the ongoing ease of operations for this on-premise data set. Moving forward, I want to talk about a couple of key considerations in this environment. The first and foremost, and the thing that I really encourage everyone on the phone to think about up front, is really what your environment strategy should look like in a multi-org, multi-release type of deployment. So as you can see here, as we were progressing over time in what was essentially a global commercial transformation, we had a series of overlapping releases on the data integration side for the US, for the EU, and for the business intelligence releases. Typically, what we see is that these data integrations take a little bit more of a waterfall pattern as you go through requirements, design, build, test, etc. Map that together with the CRM configuration, which is typically more of an agile sprint-based methodology. So as the CRM applications are being configured and developed on the Force.com platform, they go through their sprint cycles, and falling out of those sprint cycles, we have needs for designing, building, and deploying the integrations to support the capabilities on the CRM platform. In this kind of complex environment, it's critical to really think through how we're going to align our CRM cloud environments to the on-premise, Informatica environments and database environments to support data movement throughout our development, SIT testing, system integration testing, and user acceptance testing process. As Clive alluded to earlier, really the majority of our customers have multiple Salesforce orgs to support testing, and you really need to think through in detail and lay out well in advance how those various Salesforce orgs are going to be used during which SIT cycles, thinking through not only, am I using a Dev Pro sandbox or am I using a Dev box? How much data can I load here from both a historical viewpoint as well as building out that 360-degree view of the customer? But how does that align to those on-premise environments and the reporting and analytics that I'm going to be testing along with them? That's one key consideration that I would strongly encourage everyone to really think through. What we did, and it's mapped out a little bit here at the bottom, is we looked across our environment strategy in both the US and globally in this implementation. We actually had 7 different sandbox environments leading up to the production environment for both orgs. And what that mapped to was actually 3 tracks of on-premise environments that we alternated as we went through these releases. So for example, as we were walking through R1 for the EU, that top waterfall methodology that you see here, we might have been on the on-premise track 1 environment. And as we moved to R2, while we were still in design, build, and fit for the US, we might have been in track 2 there so that we could have multiple releases going on in parallel. This does get complicated. Again, it's key to lay this out up front and think through both the data sizing, the environment refresh strategies, and the testing needs that you have across these environments. So from environment strategy, it's also key to think about the key implementation steps that we have, alluding again to what that agile versus waterfall methodology may look like. And really, I think the key thing and the key message I would leave this audience with is really think about how our integrations are going to be aligned to the capabilities in the CRM environment. So again, CRM, as we're looking at what is the foundation, what are those first couple sprints that we're typically going to focus on, in my experience, they've always been around the account and have always been around what is that core foundation for account, master, and reference data for your environment. you start with those areas first on the CRM side, and then move to the ongoing interactions and the various business processes that we have. So as that relates to Informatica and as that relates to the data and integrations, we typically want to look at the master data management, the customer records, the alignments, the territories on your sales side, or on the patients or the key products that are going to be on the service side, and look at how we need to integrate those first, as well as look through any of those long poles in the tent that we know are going to take time to build out a complete 360-degree view of the customer. So again, as we go through that cloud-based delivery up top, we're looking at those global blueprints. We are planning those sprints according to how we're going to align capabilities. And as we go through that waterfall data integration delivery below, we're really going through plan, design, build, and deliver by capability and thinking about these things in light of those capabilities that are going to be deployed to CRM. Also critical here on the data integration side, and it's really going to talk about, how do we start moving this once it is delivered into the operate phase. So I think the thing that we're always talking about with our clients as it relates to data integration delivery is thinking through not only how is this going to be built and deployed up front, but how do we really move into operate, and what is going to be the right technical setup and what's going to be the right business process setup once we get into ongoing operations for all of our data integrations. Again, in my mind, the data integration components of these solutions is just as business critical as the cloud-based solutions. If we are not processing transactions back and forth to our vendors in a timely manner, if those solutions go down, or if we're losing data, that is a critical production issue that we're going to be facing. So as we get into operate here, again, thinking forward to how are we going to be monitoring daily batches, how are we going to be providing post-production support, and how are we going to be transitioning knowledge to the ongoing operations team. One of the key models that we talk about in that transition of knowledge is really how do we build a Salesforce Center of Excellence model, and how do we really make sure that that Salesforce Center of Excellence model is enabled as part of the overall project delivery. So what you see on the slide here is really a Salesforce Center of Excellence model at a high level that is your first-line business user support, it's your change management and your business design, as well as a kind of shared capability around application and integration development factories, as well as partnering with the business on data management and testing. So as we look at as an ongoing capability, Salesforce Center of Excellence, we really want to identify what are those key critical things that are going to both need to be there from an ongoing run perspective. How do we support that application and those ongoing integrations? And typically that's a combination of both business and technical resources that are identified there. When, for example, we have a issue or a file comes in from a third-party source that does not conform to standards, we want to make sure that that notification goes directly to the owner of the relationship with that third-party vendor and make sure that they are aware of where the issue was so that they can communicate appropriately and take the steps required with that vendor to follow up and close it out. The other thing that this Center of Excellence model really relies on is breaking down the barriers between build and run. So a second part of that model is not only the ongoing support, but we know that these applications, once they're up, they are very end-user friendly. When we do deliver a large amount of intricate and interesting data to the business to build up that 360-degree view of the customer, that is typically something that people will continue to identify new sources for. Especially where I work in the life sciences commercial world, we have rapidly changing needs within both the end user community as well as what companies want to do to engage with their customers. So we know that these applications will not be static, and as Clive alluded to, where we see a lot of these things going is really building on top of the Force.com platform for application development and additional customer engagement. So really breaking down that barrier between the build and the run of an organization is a key critical component of any good COE. In closing, and I think we wanted to leave a good chunk of time here at the end for questions, but in closing, just a couple of key solution considerations that I would leave everybody with. So first and foremost, up top, we talked a little bit about it, the right tools for the right job. Thinking through upfront, designing our integration patterns and designing the underlying technology stack that supports those integration patterns and locking that at the beginning of the project is really a key thing so that you really reduce the time it takes to make decisions on how integrations actually come into your environment and how those get integrated into Salesforce. So as it relates to Informatica, that's really making that differentiation, that distinction. If you're working in a hybrid cloud and on-premise environment, what is the right time to use Informatica Cloud? What is the right time to use Informatica on-premise? And setting the rules, the guidelines, and the standards for both of those. Those rules, those guidelines, those standards can be really sped up throughout the course of the project by designing the right integration templates. And so that second bullet point there is once we have the right tools, you really want to give the development teams on these large projects the right standards and the right integration templates. And these are everything from error routing to change data capture to that ABC framework, that audit balance and control framework. These shared components, and again, for folks that are Informatica developers on the phone, these shared components, should be sitting in their own folders in Informatica so that they are almost looked at as a work stream in and of themselves, and that they are monitored for use throughout, and that they are kept up to date with each ongoing deployment. So making sure that we have the integration templates in place is really a second key to ensuring the long-term success of the project and the long-term, cohesion of the ETL code. And finally, I think I've hit on it a couple times, but just to reiterate, that transition to business as usual and that transition from build to run, in a perfect world should really be like, two cogs, one turning the other, and the build team integrate it right with the run team at the right points in time so that we have the right knowledge transition, that we have the right application handoff, and that handover from build to that center of excellence model that we talked about really becomes a seamless transition to the end business community, so that as we're going through a large implementation, you really then have the ability to continue making those incremental releases and continuing to deliver value to your end clients. So with that, Clive, I'll turn it back to you, sir.
Thanks so much, Ryan. So I'm glad you came to the question and answer slide because I've got lots of questions that have come in as you've been talking, actually. So,
great.
Is your I'll take them from the top. And so, is your goal with the COE to make the customer kind of self-sufficient, or is that kind of a byproduct, or how do you see that working?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I think a lot of our clients, as they're moving to cloud-based solutions, and again, I'll speak for my industry specifically, the majority of our clients have some capabilities in the cloud, but are really reevaluating their overall cloud-based platforms. So our goal going through an implementation is to really make sure we're standing up the internal capabilities to make sure that that customer, once the implementation is complete, that center of excellence model is really self-sustaining and self-sufficient going forward. That includes both, making sure we have the right folks engaged from both the business and technical side during the implementation. And again, as I said, as we are going through that implementation, really standing up the ongoing operating models, the operating procedures, and the processes required to make that center of excellence sufficient going forward.
Super. So you talked. So I have another question here that says, you mentioned about in your life sciences. Maybe I'll bring the life sciences implementation slide back up. Let me see if I can get back to that one. One
Sure.
second. The question asked, you showed us the high-level architecture. What sort of benefits did because obviously we didn't see what happened before, but what sort of benefits did the life sciences company see after the COE and all the architecture was in place?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was really night and day, right? So you didn't see the before picture of this, but this client, like a lot of clients, had really a complete on-premise environment for their commercial organization. So they had a number of field-grown, native iOS apps that were built. They were sitting on on-premise solution for their sales, service, and marketing. However, that was very disjointed, and the data A, was not clean in that environment, and B, they really didn't have visibility across the sales and service teams, didn't have visibility within the sales teams actually of how they were interacting and touching their customers. So with multiple field forces in play, one rep might have been calling on one doctor one day, and someone else from another field force might have called on that same doctor the next week and not even known that their colleague was in that office the week before. So the before picture of this was very focused around that on-premise environment and really had a whole spider web of integrations linking that together over a long period of time. Moving to this environment, first and foremost, right, just having all the reps and all the service folks on the same Force.com platform saw immediate benefits, and you were able to bring a lot of that data together just through the native usage of Force.com. And then secondly, the bigger problem was, what do we do with all of our other partners, and what do we do with all of our other data that's coming in? And that's really where the use of Informatica, the use of standards and guidelines within that commercial data hub, and the use of the master data management solutions really pulled all of that third-party data together, standardized, cleansed, and governed it within that commercial data hub so that it was able to be fed up to the US org or fed up to the EU org to really bring additional insights into those customers direct at the tips of the fingers of the end users of those applications.
Super. Thanks so much. I have another question actually based on this slide, so that's lucky. The audit, balance, and control framework, I see that right in the middle. Is that something that is specifically Deloitte expertise, or is it a combination of tools and other third-party applications?
Yeah, absolutely. So technically, it's a combination of database Unix and Informatica code. Really, that's something that we deploy at all of our clients as kind of a standard capability within data integration. So it's really the expertise that we bring. That contains basically a series of business rules that we set up front through requirements and functional design to ensure that data cleanliness exists and to ensure that error notifications go out to the right people. So a good example that might be, if I get in, a very simple example might be if I get in a file and it doesn't have the right date format or something like that, that gets logged, the specific error is logged, and a specific notification is sent via email to the person that might have that. More complicated examples are where we're looking for certain conditions in the data or special characters or things that don't meet the right business justification for that data coming in, getting captured, and those errors getting logged and captured. So technically, it's a blend of technologies, but really it's meant as a kind of standards and guidelines to keep that data cleansed, safe, and governed within that data exchange layer.
Super. Thank you. We've got another question on your slide here. I'm going to move to this slide. It says,
Yes, sir.
can this approach be adapted to smaller implementations? So, for example, if I just have one or two sales clouds.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, this is kind of a large-scale implementation, multiple orgs, multiple releases. If you have one or two sales clouds, again, and I'm assuming we mean different instances of Sales Cloud there, you really want to think through how you're going to be building those two different orgs in parallel, and what are your needs for integration. How many different integration patterns are we going to have coming in and out of them? Having different orgs for Salesforce is not an inexpensive proposition. They do cost money, and you really want to think through, as I'm going to go through a software development lifecycle, my design, build, system integration test, UAT, deployment, how am I going to support that at each step of the way? If I have two different sales clouds, do I need both of them to go through at the same time, or are they going to go through at separate times? So it's really thinking through, how am I going to walk through my entire project, and what are my environment needs?
Yeah, I think I would echo that to the person that asked the question. I don't think that focusing on the number of orgs is the right thing. I see a bunch of folks with a singular org, but it has tons of data in it, as you mentioned, Brian, tons of endpoints. So this, and of course, at least with every production org, there's going to be a sandbox org. So I couldn't agree more with you, really, Brian. Focusing on the number of orgs is a useful start, but probably not the thing to think of going forward. Actually, I think on this side I've got a question here. So the multi-release phases, is that a documented process, or are you using some sort of ITIL tools?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
Yeah, let me see if I can get some more clarification there.
The clarification on the multi-release process is really, the needs of the business, and the reason why we took this was it was a very aggressive move from, legacy environments, really getting to the new cloud-based architecture and that new commercial data hub as quickly as possible. This was, by all means, this implementation in this case study here, a very large-scale transformation driven by some key business deadlines, as well as a desire to move as quickly as possible. So the driver here was not necessarily technical, but really business in nature.
Perfect. Thank you.
If that helps answer.
We'll see. We'll see if a clarification question comes in. So, on your slide here, implementation steps. What do you tackle first? Do you tackle integration or data quality? Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah. So I would answer that a couple of ways. And I think the first thing that you tackle is understanding your data. And if that's a migration from legacy to a new environment, or if that's just a pure ongoing integration, really the first step along the way that I have, as we look through that design, and there's a step there where we have source to target mappings, really it's understanding that source of data, understanding the legacy data that may reside in that application, understanding that business process change that may occur when we move to a Force.com application, really making sure that we have a good state of understanding of what that data set is going to look like, and then seeing, for example, if that business process is going to change, how is it going to change? How does that data need to be refined through either the ETL or through that data hub to make sure that, we're either A, identifying and cleaning up legacy data issues before they start flowing through our architecture, or B, at least understanding the data issues that would be caught, and the things that might come up throughout, that again would fall into that ABC, that audit, balance, and control framework for business justification or business ownership in the future. Especially within the landscape I work with, data quality is an ever-changing thing, especially as we have multiple MDM platforms, multiple vendors coming in and out. Really, I think you plan your best, you identify the scenarios, you identify everything that you can based on your knowledge of that legacy environment and business process change, and then plan to capture and plan to have a team specifically dedicated to monitoring and managing that ongoing data quality aspect. But great question.
Super, thank you. And then, so I'm going to make a last call for questions, just to ensure that we don't run out of time and we can get everybody. Let me see, what question have we not answered? I think actually, I think I'm good. I'll give one last call. Okay, we're good. So I'll move on. So thank you to everybody that submitted questions. They were really good. So I'll give you the sort of you had ABC. I'm going to have 1, 2, 3. So please, if you want to go try Informatica Cloud yourself, you can go to informatica.com/cloud trial, and you can use the Informatica data integration tools for free for 30 days. Follow us on social at InfoCloud, or to get all our sort of latest updates on Twitter, and of course we're on Facebook and YouTube and all that sort of great stuff too. If you want more information and go directly to informaticacloud.com, that'll take you to a subset of Informatica's corporate website, where all the Informatica cloud-related subjects are in a microsite. Actually, I have a question. If my customer, here we go, Ryan. If my customer went off and did the trial themselves, how soon, or is it typical that they sort of just defer everything to Deloitte and bring Deloitte in and say, hey, just come and do it for me, or is there a mixture, or is there a typical pattern there that you've seen?
In terms of actually engaging for an implementation?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think when we look at these implementations, we really look to partner with our clients on these. Again, it's not just the implementation itself, but it's the long-term success and the meeting of the business objectives. So again, I'm happy to have any conversations with folks as necessary, but I think it's really, we would come in, work with folks to define both the upfront use case, the upfront benefits, and the key capabilities that you would look to enable. And then really, there's a number of different models to go and start implementing. And that's something that is really on a case-by-case basis based on internal capabilities and desire to move as quickly as possible.
Super. It's always the way. I've got one last question that crept in. It must have been again on something we said prompted the question. How long to get to a Salesforce sort of center of excellence? Is there a typical time for that?
No, I mean, again, it depends on your starting point. So if someone's already has an Informatica and Salesforce deployment out there, and it's really just an operating model, that's a pretty quick thing to come in and identify the capabilities and the operating procedures that are necessary and that may not exist. Again, that's more of a organization and a capability mapping exercise. And then again, as you're going through an implementation, if you're looking at a single application that's fairly straightforward and out of the box, you're looking at a much smaller implementation time frame than kind of the use case that we had here, where we were looking at multi-org, global, multi-country, multi-region deployments across various business functions with literally in the range of hundreds of integrations throughout. Obviously, that takes a little bit longer.
Got it. Got it. Well, with that, I'd just like to say thank you, Ryan. It was a superb session. I really enjoyed it. It was really, really interesting. Thank you to everybody for submitting your questions, and thank you for taking what was nearly an hour out of your day to listen to this webinar. And stay tuned. There are other webinars in this Salesforce Center of Excellence series. So thank you, Ryan, and thanks to everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.